guys, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutrition advice. I'm going to talk today about elimination diets and food sensitivities because it's not a topic I've really covered before, but I do get quite a few questions about food intolerances and food sensitivities. So I thought I'd put a video together to cover the basics so that I can refer people to this video when they ask me these questions. It's quite surprising, but many people do have food sensitivities. Most people are unaware of these sensitivities, and the two most common offending foods I've found through my research and through through the practical aspects of practicing nutrition, the two most common foods that are offenders for food sensitivities and tolerances are dairy and wheat. And if you go on the internet and you look up and you research about food sensitivities, you will see that dairy and wheat, they come up time and time again. Now, obviously, when you look at people's diets, the foods that people most commonly eat and the two foods that are in most of the things we eat are dairy and wheat, and therefore it's not surprising that you put two and two together and you realise that a lot of people have insensitivities and they're not aware of these insensitivities. Now, what is a food insensitivity? What is a food intolerance? An actual allergy, when you have an anaphylactic shock, if you have an allergy, proper allergy to something, you have a serious problem because your respiratory tract becomes closed, and you require a shot of adrenaline in order to be able to survive. That's a pure allergy, and some people do have that reaction to, for example, to nuts. We're not really talking about that kind of reaction. That's a severe allergy, and that's actually thankfully quite rare. Although lots of people are allergic to nuts in that kind of way, and they actually have to avoid complete contact with them. What we're really talking about is a mild intolerance to something that produces what appears to be idiopathic symptoms, and these symptoms can occur for the whole of a person's life. And they're completely unaware that they're being caused by the foods that they're eating, and they put these symptoms down to wear and tear, or they accept that it's something they have to live with. Most commonly, skin conditions are quite commonly caused by food intolerances. Mental disorders, including anxiety and depression, can be triggered by food intolerances, particularly to dairy. Dairy, has particular properties about it that can cause mental changes, and joint pain as well. Arthritis is quite commonly caused by food insensitivities. Food insensitivities tend to develop when you develop something called a leaky gut syndrome. When you have your gut is really an inside-out skin. Your food is not inside you, and it's not been absorbed until it gets into the blood. Your gut is really just another layer of skin. So food that's sitting in your gut is not in your body. It's outside the skin. That food has to get through the epithelial cells and into the blood, and to do that it's digested, and once it's in the blood, that food is considered inside the body. But food actually inside the gut is actually outside of the body. So the gut is a very important barrier, like your skin. Your skin is kind of a waterproof layer that protects you from absorbing things in the environment that you don't require, and it's a selective semi-permeable membrane. And your gut is more permeable because the idea of your gut is to absorb nutrients and food. But having said that, it's semi-permeable. It's more permeable than your skin, but it's still a barrier. And your gut cells are highly metabolically active, and much of the food, the chemicals, the phytochemicals that are absorbed into these enterocytes are actually metabolized and then excreted back into the gut, because the body tries to limit the absorption of a lot of these chemicals because it sees them as toxins. So it's a very important barrier. If you develop a leaky gut, you develop effectively a hole in your gastrointestinal system, and this hole allows proteins into your body before they've been completely digested and before they've been analyzed by the gut cells to see if they're suitable for absorption. They go straight into the blood as proteins often. And these proteins are foreign objects in the body, and when they get into the body, they're attacked by the immune system. And the immune system then becomes intolerant to them because they've been introduced into the blood and they're foreign compounds. Your body then develops these reactions, these autoimmune reactions, and these other metabolic reactions to these proteins. And even if you manage to actually reduce your leaky gut, your gut goes back to being healthy, it's very you can still have these food intolerances. So really we're looking at a breakdown in your digestive processes that allow proteins into the blood, and these proteins can then become immunogenic, and they can cause all sorts of problems. Poor diet and many factors can actually cause the leaky gut syndrome, and there are bacteria, there's microorganisms as well that can cause a leaky gut. Cholera is one toxin that actually breaks down the gut cells and causes gaps to occur within the gut, and that can cause a leaky gut as well. So there's many causes, but once you've developed these reactions, you have an intolerance to this food. The proteins in this food are recognized as foreign, and so when you eat this food, you have a reaction to it. So these are food insensitivities, and most people have some food insensitivities. It's very rare that you come across somebody that's not insensitive to something. And like I say, dairy and wheat are the two most common offenders, but there are many others. And anything really with protein in it can cause these reactions. So generally that's a little bit of a clue. Those foods with the lowest protein content are generally the ones that cause the least amount of food, the least chance of causing a food intolerance. So once you've developed a food intolerance, it's important to identify it and eliminate it, because like I say, although you don't get an actual allergic reaction from these foods, they cause metabolic problems in your body, and this can lead to symptoms that are often dismissed as being idiopathic and don't have a known cause. But doctors really, the mainstream medical community is not trained to understand food intolerances and food sensitivities, and so they don't really ever uncover that food could be the cause of these these aches and pains. So there's identifying and eliminating food insensitivities is important, because you don't want to live your life having these often these pains and aches and pains are chronic and low level, but they are still debilitating in some cases, and some people can actually have quite severe reactions to food intolerances, and they can actually pass through their entire life not realizing that they could have been much more healthy than they actually were, and these aches and pains are not normal. And often what I tend to find is that somebody will come to me and they'll say, I've got a really high quality diet, I've really followed your advice, I'm eating high quality foods, and I still feel awful. I still feel tired, still feel fatigued. That is a classic chance that person has a food intolerance. If you're eating very high quality foods, if you've eliminated junk, you're not eating processed foods, and your diet is of high quality, but you still feel tired, you still feel you don't have good energy levels, you still feel there's something wrong, there's aches and pains, that's a very good sign there that you've got some kind of food insensitivity, and an elimination diet would help. Now, what is an elimination diet? An elimination diet is really just a diet that you can use to identify which foods are causing these food insensitivities and food intolerances. Now, there are different types of elimination diet, and I don't want to prescribe a particular type, because you can do your own research and you can pick the one that will work for yourself. There's many guides on the internet as to how to do elimination diet. I just wanted to explain the theoretical reason why you would do one and how you'd go about it. The idea of elimination diet is to first of all eliminate nearly every single food from your diet. If you have a food, for example, if you fasted for a week, I'm not suggesting you do fast, because some elimination diets do require you to fast, some don't. But if you did fast, and you had a food insensitivity, when you're fasting, you're obviously not taking that food into your body, and therefore during the fasting period you will actually find that the symptoms that are related to that food insensitivity will decline or disappear. And this is what a lot of people that fast do actually find, that they find that, aches and pains disappear when they're fasting, and they actually feel that their energy levels go up, and that again is another sign that they've got a food insensitivity. So the idea is to get rid of as many foods as possible, and some people recommend that you actually start with a fast. Now the foods that if you didn't want to start with a fast but you wanted to eliminate as many foods as possible, the best foods to keep in your diet if you're going through a period where you're trying to eliminate as many as possible, fresh fruits are usually acceptable, but not citrus fruit. Citrus fruit can cause reactions in sensitivities in people quite commonly. And in terms of vegetables, cooked vegetables are usually okay, but there are some that can cause food insensitivities. Tomatoes are a common offender, members of the eggplant family, and potatoes as well. Really any of the nightshade family group of plants is seen as quite allergenic. So those are foods to avoid. So most fruits and vegetables are okay as long as you cook the vegetables. Now rice is usually another low allergenic food as well, and that's another food that you could keep in your diet. So really what you have to do is eliminate as many foods as you can, and eat as few as you can that you're comfortable with. And really you need to go through this kind of cleansing period for about a week. And what should happen is the symptoms that you were experiencing, either poor skin or arthritic joints, or mind fogginess or tiredness, they should disappear. And if they're caused by a food intolerance. Now, once you've got to your through your baseline period of a number of days eating this very small, very select group of low allergenic foods, they're usually very low in protein. Your protein content of your diet will probably drop quite considerably. You then have to reintroduce the foods into your diet one at a time. Starting with the ones that are least likely to cause a reaction. So don't introduce dairy to start with, don't reintroduce wheat. Introduce the foods that you can find lists of foods that are generally low, have a low risk of causing intolerance, and reintroduce them one at a time. So if you, for example, have started your elimination diet and you're eating pears and fresh fruit, introduce rice or some other vegetables as well, and introduce them one at a time. And it's very important, I have to emphasize this, you have to introduce the foods one at a time. So that means you can't put in processed foods that contain multiple foods, because if you do that you won't be able to identify which is the offending food. Because how the elimination diet works is when you reintroduce the offending food, you will get the symptoms that you had been experiencing that disappeared presumably during that first elimination period, they will come back. So you need to know which food is causing those symptoms by introducing them one at a time, and that means introducing whole foods. And what you effectively do is you go through your diet and you introduce foods one at a time, and you need to identify when your symptoms come back. And when they come back, the food that you introduce, or when those symptoms return, is the food that is your offending food, that is causing your food intolerance. There are other tests you can do. For example, when you reintroduce a food, take your pulse. This is called the pulse test. You can take your pulse and measure your heart rate, and then reintroduce the food and eat some of it, and then retake your pulse. And if you find a big spike in your in the rate of your your pulse rate, that can be an indication as well that is causing an insensitivity. But it doesn't always work, so therefore you need to put all of these pieces together as you're going through this process. And I would recommend that you write things down so that you can look back and write down how you feel. Keep a journal of your daily events and how you feel, how tired you were, so that you can look back on it and try and identify these offending foods. It's actually really difficult to identify the foods, and you may have to do an elimination diet a number of times to get it right. They do tend to work if you're very prepared and very well organized, and you have a very analytical mind and you use that analysis during your diet. You have to really pay attention to how you feel, how your brain's working, how your joints feel, and you have to try and keep your life as stable as possible, so you're only looking at one variable at a time. That's really all there is to elimination diets, and you just keep reintroducing the foods until you get the symptoms that you are trying to reduce. They come back, and when they come back, that is likely the food that you're intolerant from. And once you find you've got a food insensitivity, you have to then avoid that food. And like I say, most people are intolerant to both wheat, to either wheat or dairy, and some people are intolerant to both. They seem to be very common in terms of causing food intolerances. So that's something that you need to pay attention to. And obviously, if you have to eliminate wheat and dairy from your diet, that actually changes most people's diets considerably. Wheat and dairy, if you're not intolerant to them, are not particularly bad foods. They're quite healthy. They can be part of a high quality diet, but if you're intolerant to them, you really do have to eliminate them, because that's going to cause you these symptoms all the way through your life. You're never going to be able to reverse that, really. But it's also really important that if you do have a leaky gut, you need to heal your gut as well, and that means that you need to have time away from these foods. And this is really the basis of having a period where you don't reintroduce the foods. 7 to 14 days, 1 or 2 weeks, maybe a bit of a fast in terms where you eliminate all foods to start with. And that is really to allow your time. So if you do have a leaky gut, allow it time to heal. The gut, the turnover of the cells in the gut is very fast, and the gut will heal itself very quickly. But you have to give it time away from the foods and the problem that is perhaps causing that leakiness. And that means that you've got to go on a very low allergenic diet. Introduce foods very, very slowly. And this whole diet, this process, might take many months to get through, to work its way through. But you will quickly be able to hopefully build up a baseline diet of foods that you can eat, and it will be based on fruits and vegetables. You'll probably find that in doing this you'll actually lose quite a bit of weight as well, because you will be eating a very, very high quality diet, and you'll be eating you'll be eliminating some of these foods that can sometimes cause weight gain in those people that are insensitive to them. So that's the basis of an elimination diet, and I hope that was helpful. I don't want to prescribe a particular type of elimination diet, because I think it depends on the person and their lifestyle. You have to adapt the diet to your own personal lifestyle and pick the one that suits you best. And some people try a particular type of elimination diet, don't like it, so they try a different one, and that works better for them. So do your own research, find an elimination diet that works for you. If you do feel that you possibly have food insensitivity, if you feel tired, if you've got poor skin, if you've got arthritic pain, if you've got some kind of mental disorder like anxiety or depression, there's no obvious cause to it. If you're fatigued all the time, if you find it irritable, these can be symptoms that you have a food intolerance. And some people do know that they're insensitive to particular foods, and they continue to eat them. But it's nice to have the choice whether you want to do that or not. And to have that choice, you've got to be able to identify the offending foods. So the best way to do that is through an elimination diet. So I hope that was helpful. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments box below. I will try to get back to you as soon as I can, as always, and I will see you soon for another video. And in the meantime, please take care.